Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth, and we have a really dynamite show lined up. We will be talking about MLB Mount Rushmore, but the Pitchers Edition, authored by Greg Fuchs, the man without a nickname. But yes, folks, we are working on a nickname. And we also want to welcome Candy Ebling, the host, of Fire Up Wisconsin. And Candy's kind enough to come on here tonight. Eric Katz unable to do so, but we still have a list for him as well. So meanwhile, guys, and of course, none other Rick Curti, who has been very, very busy throughout the whole month of June. I keep him real busy. We have some pretty good plans and a picture for him as well. Well,
I guess you can call me. I guess you can call me the reliever then, right? Because I'm coming in relief for Eric.
Yeah, well, I guess that could be your name tonight, Candy, the reliever. But you won't be a reliever pretty soon. You're going to be a regular. So, but at least it does happen to work in this particular situation. Great show lined up. Hope you can stay with us for the entire show because we have a lot of good stuff here and a lot of names dropping. So, in Florida, raindrops keep falling on your head tonight, folks. Okay. Pitchers' names be falling in your brain. And where did I come up with that? I give that an assist to my Diet Mountain Dew, the lows of it, the Diet Coke that got me going earlier. All right. Well, Greg Fuchs will lead it off here. Of course, it's only appropriate for a baseball show. I use that specific term. And Greg, why don't you at least talk about the beginning of your article, knowing that I'll bet there's probably not a person alive for when these first names actually began.
Glad to. I broke the Mount Rushmore into an early era and the modern era. Modern era being like 1940 and after. But there's really an early era with the names that hardly any baseball fan's going to recognize. Guys that played before 1900 who are very high on the all-time wins list. Kid Nichols played from 1890 to 1906, won 361 games, 6th all time. Also winning 361 games was the infamous Bud Galvin, who played 1875 to 1892. Then you have Tim Keefe, played 1880 to 1893. He's 10th all-time with 342 wins. The amazing thing about him, he had a 6-year stretch where he won anywhere from 32 to 42 games each season. And the last guy is old Haas Radbourne. Gotta like the nicknames they gave these guys back in the old day. You got a kid, a pud, and an old Haas. He played from 1880 to 1891, won 309 games, which is 19th all time. The amazing thing about him is he had 2 seasons back-to-back where he won 48 games and then 59 games. When he started, one of those years he started 73 games. Now, in today's era, it's like if you pitch 200 innings, that's a lot. Between the 5-man rotations, pitch limits, uses of the bullpens, 200 innings is like a high number for guys these days. He had 6 seasons where he pitched over 400 innings, and he had 1 season where he pitched 678 innings. Just mind-boggling. I'm not sure if pitchers pitched underhand back in those days, but the amount of innings and wins and complete games they did back then is just mind-boggling. Okay, but enough about the early 1900s. Let's go to the early era for some names. If you're a baseball fan, you're intimately aware of these guys.
Well, let me mention one thing before you do. Early 1900s. Why don't we just talk about the fact that you're in the late 1800s, right? Okay, we want to make sure before we preface it, the 1800s. When I say there are no many. I don't know how many people are alive back then for the 1800s. I could probably count them on my hands. Okay. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't losing my mind here, that we were in the late 1800s. I don't have any family members or ancestors or whatever back then. So
MLB was considered to start in 1876, which is only like a dozen years after the end of the Civil War. So puts it in its proper context. All right. So let's look. So doing the Mount Rushmore for this early period, like 1900 to 1940, was relatively easy. And any baseball fans can be familiar with these names. Everybody knows Cy Young, primarily because the best pitcher of the year gets the Cy Young Award. And there's a reason it's called the Cy Young Award. He won 511 games, which is 94 more than any other pitcher in the history of the game. He had a whip of 1.13, and he pitched over 7,300 innings, which is 24% more innings than any other pitcher in the history of the game. Just amazing. And one of the reasons he pitched so many innings, he had 749 complete games. In today's game, you're lucky if a guy completes one game in a season. He completed 92% of all his starts. Just mind-boggling. Bullpens were non-existent back in the old days, apparently. Next guy on the list, Walter Johnson, second on the all-time list with 417 wins. He has the third best ERA all-time for pitchers with 200 wins at 2.17. He's got 3,500 strikeouts, which is ninth all-time, and his whip of 1.06 is the second best all-time for pitchers with 200 wins. Another guy with a very similar career, Christy Matheson, 373 wins, third all-time. He only lost 188 games, so he had a good win-loss percentage. His ERA of 2.13 and his whip of 1.06 are the second best in the history of the game for pitchers with over 200 wins. So just three studs. The fourth stud, almost as good as those guys, Grover Cleveland Alexander, not to be confused with the president. 373 wins, tied Matheson for third best all-time. Had a career whip of 1.12 and the ERA at 2.56. So just some amazing stats put up by those guys. One of the things you have to keep in consideration, especially for the ERA back in those days, not a lot of home runs were hit in the first couple decades of Major League Baseball. So that kept keep the ERAs down. So let's go to the modern era, where it was a challenge to do the modern era for a couple of reasons. One, there are just a ton of good pitchers, Hall of Fame pitchers. It was tough delineating between who's going to make the top four into Mount Rushmore. And the other thing is, in the 70s, 80s, teams switched from 4-man rotations to 5-man rotations. So obviously, you're not getting as many starts, not pitching as many innings. So you're not going to get as many wins. You're not going to get as many strikeouts. So that made it a little tough to compare apples to apples. But the first two selections for me were incredibly easy. For anyone who's been a baseball fan in the last 30 or so years, the one pitcher that just jumps off the page at you memory-wise for me is Greg Maddox. I mean, despite pitching in the 5-man rotation era, he won 355 games. That's 8th all-time, which is amazing considering he was in the 5-man rotation. And for those of you who remember Maddox, you probably remember the 7-year stretch where his ERA was between 1.76 and 2.72. I mean, that is just amazing considering how prevalent home runs are these days. And I didn't check the calendar of the day, but some of those ERAs were probably during the steroid era. So just an amazing career considering he pitched during the steroid era. And he won 4 Cy Youngs. Now, Cy Youngs, I forgot when they started awarding Cy Youngs, but it was, I don't know, the 1950s, I want to say. So obviously the guys like Christy Matheson, et cetera, didn't even have the opportunity to win Cy Youngs. The other guy was a no-brainer for me, a little older, Warren Spahn, pitched 1942 to 1965. His 363 wins ranks 5th all-time. So after you get by those 4 all-time greats, Johnson, Young, Matheson, and Alexander, he's next on the list. I don't think most people remember Warren Spahn as being that successful. Completed over half his starts, had a 3.09 ERA and a whip of 1.19. So he had a tremendous career. The next spot on the list got a little tough because there was a lot of pitchers who, off the top of my head, sort of jumbled together. Juan Marichal, Bob Gibson, Whitey Ford, Bob Feller, Jim Palmer, all had great careers, very similar statistics. The other guy who had very similar statistics, but won like 30, 40, or 50 more games than those guys was Tom Seaver. So Tom Seaver makes it onto my Mount Rushmore for the modern era. 311 wins, an ERA of 2.86, a whip of 1.12. He's 6th all-time on the strikeout list, and he won 3 Cy Young Awards. The next guy on the list, and I got to admit, when I started doing the research, I had absolutely no intention of putting this guy on the Mount Rushmore. And this guy's probably the most controversial of the 4, Randy Johnson. But his 303 wins ranked 22nd all-time, and he had a win percentage of .680, incredibly high. compared to all the other Hall of Famers who pitched during his era. His ERA was 3.29, but what you remember best about Johnson was his strikeouts. And he is second all-time on the strikeout list behind Nolan Ryan. And he also won 5 Cy Young Awards. So between the wins and the win percentage and 5 Cy Young Awards, I just couldn't keep him off a Mount Rushmore. Although I'm guessing some of you guys are going to have someone else on Mount Rushmore besides him. So now I'll defer back to you, Scott, and take it away.
All right, Greg, thank you very much. Good list. I really like it. It's pretty interesting, and there's no question your research is second to none. So good job, Greg. All right, Candy/Eric Katz, who couldn't be with us tonight, but he did take the time to send us a little list. So why don't you go ahead and talk, Candy, about Eric's list, and then you can come up with your own.
So Eric just gave me a list of just 4 names. So his Mount Rushmore is just 4. It's not broken down to any era or anything like that. His number 1 was Cy Young. Number 2 was Walter Johnson. 3 was Mariano Rivera. And 4 was Nolan Ryan. So as I was preparing for the show myself, I sat and I'm like, okay, well, what constitutes the greatest pitcher? Is it innings pitched? Is it strikeouts? Is it ERA? Is it whip? Is it complete games? And then I was thinking, if I was really going to do some more research, is it the ballparks that some of the pitchers were pitching in? Because were they hitter-friendly ballparks? Or, back in the day, were the foul was the ballpark big, and was there a lot of foul territory that people could go and catch foul balls easier than the fans are up closer? And so I'm like, well, what do I constitute as the best of the best? I'm like, well, of course you got to put Cy Young on it. I mean, there's, like you said, Greg, 749 complete games is unheard of. I mean, most pitchers these days don't, pitch that many. And then to pitch 7,000 innings, I can't imagine. I was a pitcher in softball. I can't imagine pitching that many. That's just crazy. So, he's top of the list, and that's why the award is named for him. And then I really went into more of the modern era, and I have Greg Maddox on the list. I just, longevity, over 5,000 innings pitched. That tells me that you lasted a long time. You had a great career. You didn't just, you're not a couple of ins and outs. Then on my list would be Nolan Ryan. He won 324 games. He did, he pitched over 5,000 innings, and he had 222 complete games himself. And then I looked at one of the interesting stats that I looked at was what was the percent of the batters did he strike out? And his percent strikeout was 25.3%. So that means out of 4 batters, 1 batter all struck out. He struck them out. So that to me was important. Then I went Tom Seaver. He again 4,782 innings. So a lot of it had to do with me with longevity. He only struck out 18.8% of the batters, but that still was a lot. Randy Johnson is up there with the 28.6% strikeout ratio. And then last but not least, if I was going, that would have been 4. If I was going to go any further, I would go Pedro Martinez.
Well, I thought you have already Cy Young. Greg
Cy Young I just put on there, but he would be before the modern era.
Okay, so Randy Johnson technically would have been your
Greg Maddox, Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, and Randy Johnson.
Okay, very good. Okay, go ahead. Continue.
Oh, no, that would be my 4. I have a couple more that we can talk about a little bit after we go through all the lists, but.
So you went with Cy Young, obviously, because of the obvious, and then you added 4, which is okay, because after all, we figured, he had 4 and 4, but, it's okay to just go with 1 and then go break them down however you want to. All right, well, very good. Well, so far, I'm impressed with both the lists. All right, Mr. Opinion. I know that you probably, your history of this game is like no other. I assume you did two separate lists for both of them. Is that correct? So,
Yes, sir.
all right. So, Rick.
Okay, well, this is like the early list or the dead ball era list. Cy Young, of course, you got to have him on there. It's like not having Babe Ruth on your list. They named an award after him. Over 500 wins. We're never going to see that again. Over 300 losses, which is a record. Never going to see that again. They named the award after him. So you got to have him on there. Second on my list is Walter Johnson. To me, he's the greatest pitcher of all time, in my opinion. The guy he had over 400 wins. He had 279 losses. And he pitched 21 years, where Cy Young pitched 22 years. Third on my list is Christy Matheson. He had 373 wins, only 188 losses. His ERA was 2.13, and he pitched 17 years. And then fourth on my list would be Lefty Grove. He had exactly 300 wins, 141 losses, a 3.06 ERA, and he pitched 17 years. So that's my early modern list of pitchers. So for my current pitchers, modern era, I went with Greg Maddox. I mean, over 300 wins, 4 Cy Youngs, like 18 Gold Gloves. To me, he was the greatest pitcher I ever saw in my life. I've always told people he's like the Peyton Manning of baseball. Just cerebral, smart, articulate, pays attention to everything. He had a book of pitchers' weaknesses and their strengths and everything. I mean, he was just a genius up there. When you saw him, he looked like a bank teller. There's nothing imposing or scary about him. But when he was on the mound, he was absolutely relentless. Second on my list, probably a little controversial because he had 2 different careers, but that would be Sandy Koufax. He only had 165 wins and 87 losses. He only pitched 12 years. He's like, to me, the Gale Sayers of baseball pitchers. Short career, but it was spectacular. He won 2 World Series. He pitched 4 no-hitters. He won 3 Cy Youngs. And he's actually the youngest man ever inducted into the Hall of Fame at 36 years old. And I know his numbers are up there. And it's the first part of his career wasn't all that great. But the second part, he was so dominant. And there's a reason that he's in the Hall of Fame because I've never seen anyone that dominant ever. So third on my list would be another tall left-hander, but it's not Randy Johnson. It's Steve Carlton. And that's a name you really, when you talk about pitchers, you don't really hear, you do hear about him, but you don't. You don't put him up there on that list with everyone else. But, he was just an amazing, amazing pitcher. He had over 4,000 strikeouts. He had 329 wins, 244 losses. His ERA was 3.22. He had 4,136 strikeouts. He won the 1980 World Series, part of the 1980 World Series, and he won 4 Cy Youngs. Okay, and then fourth on my list, this was a tough one, but I had Tom Seaver, 311 wins, 205 losses. Won 3 Cy Youngs, Rookie of the Year, 5-time strikeout champion, and 12-time All-Star. So that's my list I have. I just went with longevity, consistency, wins. Like I said, Sandy Koufax probably a little controversial, but he was so dominant in the second part of his career that I couldn't leave him off my list.
It's amazingly enough to talk about Sandy Koufax. I had the good pleasure of meeting Sandy Koufax at the Florida State League All-Star game. I think it was in 1984 or 85. That was unbelievable. Great thrill for me to meet him. I think your list was really fantastic, and I love the analogy, Gale Sayers of MLB. Fantastic. All right, I'll go over my list, and I'll go over it very quickly. Cy Young, no-brainer, award named after him. Greg already pointed out the stats. What else do I need to say? 511 wins, 316 losses. Okay. Nowadays, you wonder how many guys are pitching 500 games, let alone win that many. Walter Johnson, 417. What else is there to say? Okay. I mean, those numbers don't lie. Christy Matheson, I'm with you, Greg, 373. Our list actually matched Grover Cleveland Alexander, same thing, 373. So those are my four. Greg, you and I fall in the GMTA, great minds think alike.
Think alike, all right.
Pretty much. Yeah, no. Modern era, I got to go with Warren Spahn, fifth all time, 363. I'm going to go with Nolan Ryan, 7 no hitters, 5,714 strikeouts, 7 no hitters. Most intimidating pitcher. A lot of people don't realize what a good fighter is unless you go to Robin Ventura. He'll find out that then pitch. He goes ahead and boxes too, especially when you charge them out with a guy like him that could not only punch you out with the strikeout, but he can punch you out literally. So a lot of people, just a little sub for you Texas fans, will go back and look at YouTube and see, okay, that Nolan Ryan will punch you out more ways than one. Randy Johnson, how do you argue the strikeout total? 4,875 strikeouts, won a championship with the Arizona Diamondbacks, 303 wins. And you know what, Rick? Steve Carlton. I have him on my list too. But you know why I put him on my list? Not only because of the 329 strikeouts, but in 1972, he won 27 games for a Phillies team that finished 59 and 97, won the Cy Young Award, and won 46% of his team's games. Okay. And he's fourth all time in strikeouts. I put him on there when a guy can win 27 out of 59 games. That to me is just unbelievable. Good career with the Cardinals, but also we all know what he did with the Phillies. So now I'm going to go ahead and mention a couple of honorable mentions, okay, that probably get overlooked. And I'll tell you why I'm going to do this, because I want to get people thinking this time, okay? And one of these honorable mentions, I look at them every single day when I leave my house, okay, is a guy by the name of Jim Catfish Hunter. Why would I mention Jim Catfish Hunter? Simply, okay, this. Unfortunately, he died of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease. 224 wins, 166 losses, 2012 strikeouts. 8-time All-Star, won 5 World Series. But he's the first big money free agent out there when he signed a 5-year deal with the New York Yankees, valued at $3.35 million. And, you know, he was actually courted by 23 of 24 teams, not San Francisco. And he had higher offers from San Diego and Kansas City, but he chose New York because it was closer to his home in North Carolina, and he played on natural grass, and he fulfilled that contract with George Steinbrenner. But when you think about what he did, now here's the big thing. In 1975, Catfish Hunter was the last MLB pitcher to throw 30 complete games. Greg, okay, how many guys are going to throw 30 complete games in their entire career, let alone the last guy to throw 30 complete games, okay, in their career? And if I want to sit here and play the 30s game, how many people are going to win 30 games like Denny McLain? No, he's never going to get anywhere near this list, okay? But think about Denny McLain in the 30 category for winning 30 games, and now Catfish Hunter throwing 30 complete games. What can I say? Two other guys, and I'll put Greg Maddox on the honorable mention list, even though he probably belongs on the list, but I have my 4. I'm sticking to that. Yeah, how do you ignore 355 wins in a 5-man rotation when you got fewer opportunities? You don't. We all know he played baseball like it was a chess game and prepared like no other pitcher out there. But again, unfortunately for Greg Maddox, he's only got 1 World Series title to show for it. Okay. And that's why I would put, you know, I rank Hunter probably a little bit above him. And then you have to also have to wonder what the modern day win totals are going to be. Will 225, 250 be the standard for which a lot of the 300 wins? You're not going to see many more 300 game winners. So I talked about Hunter, okay, is one guy. Okay, but what about Bob Feller? Again, another guy I had a chance to meet when I was in Gastonia, North Carolina, and I worked with the Rangers. 266 wins, 162 losses, 2,581 strikeouts, but was in World War II for 4 years serving in the Navy. How many wins could he have gotten if he didn't serve in the military academy? So you got Hunter, okay, you got Feller. But what about Bob Gibson? 251, 174, 3,117 strikeouts, 2 World Series titles. Now, everybody can make a case for Seaver and the other ones, and that's why. But I think Jim Hunter is a guy who should get more recognition because, again, his career was also shortened by arm troubles as well. We all subsequently know he had diabetes that slowed him down and had the energy. Had a 13, 14-year career. So, Rick, when you brought up Sandy Koufax, okay, it's amazing how you brought him up because Jim Catfish Hunter was a guy that I always revered. And, when he left Oakland, Charlie Finley looked real bad because I think he tried to hose him on an annuity, and it led to the arbitration hearing that turned him free. And we all know that when you go to New York, okay, let alone win there, a couple World Series titles with what they had. But again, a lot of the modern day players can be thankful that he was the first big money free agent. And we know how well these guys are getting paid now. So those are the honorable mention. There are a lot of names. So with that, Greg, okay, if you want to go ahead and name drop a little bit with some of your other ones, go ahead.
Let me start with a couple name drops that I did not include purposely. I didn't include any pitcher tainted by steroids. So 7-time Cy Young winner Roger Clemens is not going to be on my list. I thought of adding Mariano Rivera, but the very best pitchers are always starting pitchers. Rivera had an outstanding career. He did it with one pitch, basically. He threw the same pitch 99% of the time, as great as he was. If he was really that great, he would have been a starting pitcher. So I didn't put any reliever on my list. I might have been the only one who didn't include Nolan Ryan. And there's a few reasons I didn't include Nolan Ryan. First of all, let me talk, obviously, all-time strikeout leader, absolutely dominant. I think the most impressive stat about Nolan Ryan, the all-time lowest batting average against. Hitters only hit 204 against him, which is just remarkable. Now, to offset that, he walked more batters than any pitcher in the history of the game. All right? And when it comes to strikeouts, I'm not a big fan of strikeouts. I understand it's an exciting stat, but if you get the out via strikeout or a ground ball, I mean, what's the difference? You need to get outs. That's what pitchers need to do. So whether it's a strikeout, a ground ball, fly ball, to me, it doesn't really matter. The other thing was he only won, despite winning what he won, 324 games. He only won 32 more games than he lost. I mean, that's like each season he won 1 or 2 games more than he lost, which I just thought that was too much of a discrepancy to put him on Mount Rushmore. And he also, what was the other thing about Ryan? Oh, he never won a Cy Young Award, which I found very surprising. I was astounded by that.
Yeah, but
all of you had Nolan Ryan on your Mount Rushmore. I noticed none of you had Don Sutton on your Mount Rushmore.
Right. Well, let me explain something about Nolan Ryan. Okay. Number one, he didn't play on some of the better teams either. Don't tell me the California Angels were elite. Don't tell me. Hold on. Okay. The Texas Rangers were elite and the Houston Astros were elite. Okay.
Well, you pointed out Steve Carlton found a way to win on bad teams.
All right. So he did. He found a way to win with Philadelphia. But Nolan Ryan, okay, again, don't forget that Nolan Ryan did win a world championship with the Mets, so in 1969. So he has at least one championship to his name anyhow. So again, this is why there's a debate here amongst a lot of us as to why this list is so pertinent, okay? But to me, Nolan Ryan was never on a lot of the bigger teams that, Carlton was. I mean, think about it. Carlton is what the Cardinals, right, wins and what the Phillies, okay? You tell me, and of course we know, again, as I just reiterated moments ago, he was on the amazing Mets and he did some things. And don't forget the 7 no-hitters, okay? They actually count for something too. Yeah, you can certainly make a case that 30 wins over 500 and be comparable to the other ones. But again, that's what makes it such a stimulating discussion. So. All right.
So the reason I brought up Don Sutton, they both pitched a long time. They both won exactly the same number of games. But Don Sutton lost 36 fewer games. Their ERAs and whips extremely close to each other. Ryan had a slightly better ERA. Sutton had a better whip. Nobody is ever going to mention Don Sutton going on the Mount Rushmore. But Nolan Ryan will get a lot of votes, and it's because of the strikeouts. I mean, he was just a dominating pitcher. Didn't always result in wins, and he also walked a bunch of guys. I think your Bob Feller comments were good, Scott. I had overlooked that he had spent 4 years in the military. If he probably would have won another 80, 100 games if that wasn't the case, which would have put him in the top 10 probably wins all time. So that's someone further consideration. Maybe he should have been on Mount Rushmore. Catfish Hunter, I love Catfish Hunter. He was pitching, great pitcher. I wouldn't put him on Mount Rushmore. I mean, he was in that same group with the Palmers and the Juan Marichals and the Bob Gibsons. Outstanding pitcher. But I think Seaver and even some of those other guys I mentioned.
I didn't put him on Mount Rushmore, but I'll tell you one thing: if I wanted to put him on some of the top 10 pitchers in the modern era, Catfish would easily make that list, in my opinion. Okay, after all, I listed 7, and he were one of them. And we're not going to get into a top 10 on everything on the planet. I'm just saying that I'm adding it. Now, if I wanted to play the relievers game and I want to call it the combo version, I can easily get away in my mind putting Dennis Eckersley and John Smoltz on there, guys that were converted, that were proven starters that became relievers. And then you're talking about that probably won as many as probably 400 games or have been a part of 400 or 500 wins with both roles. And then you can easily make a case for Dennis Eckersley, John Smoltz. I commend Eric, though, for putting Mariano Rivera on there. Okay, because you know what? He was a heck of a pitcher. And if I were going to even dare to even put any relievers on there, how do you go ahead and forget Hoffman, was it?
Trevor Hoffman.
Trevor Hoffman, yeah.
How about Lee Smith?
Yeah, Lee Smith. I mean, Trevor Hoffman.
CC Sabathia.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can put him on there, but Trevor Hoffman, if you're going to sit here and put relievers on there, I think Trevor Hoffman would be right up there as well. So, again, and we all know about the saves records, but then again, nowadays with 1 or 2 inning saves, when we were brought up in our era, 2 or 3 inning saves comparably. But those are just other things that we could put out there. But Dennis Eckersley and John Smoltz, to me, were the old combo version. They reinvented themselves as pitchers. But yeah, if I were going to come up with a top 10 list, you better believe that Catfish Hunter would be on it. And I would certainly take into consideration Sandy Koufax being 165 and 87. And I had the good fortune of meeting Feller and Sandy Koufax, and I never collected autographs, but I happened to get one of both of those in this situation. I just wish we would have had cell phones back then. So, yeah, I mean, Greg, it was a great idea that you came up with to go along with it. You certainly have to have the pitcher's version compared to what we had done on our last show when we talked about position players / hitters. So you talk about the perfect bookend for Mount Rushmore's. You definitely hit a grand slam with that idea. Candy, some thoughts?
So I want to make a comment, though, Greg. I'm going to have to, if you're talking about a Mount Rushmore of pitchers, and you said what's the difference if it's a strikeout or if they hit it out? The difference is you're involving another player. If you're a dominant pitcher, you don't need you don't care about if there's fielders behind you because you want to take care of the business yourself. You want to get them out. So for me as a pitcher, that was my goal, which for me to strike them out because I didn't want to have to involve any other players, a possibility of an error, a ball hitting the, bad bounce and taking off and then was not getting them out. And yes, I understand a lot of walks, but some of that is also the strike zone and how opinionated it is with the strike zone. Because back in the day, they didn't have, like now the TV has cameras and, there might be these refs coming, umpires that they're going to do it called based on where it lands, but it didn't before. So I think balls and strikes can be very opinionated based on the umpire you have, but as a dominated pitcher, you don't want people to fly out. You don't want the ball. You don't want them to hit the ball. And that's the object of the game is for the batter to hit the ball. So that's just my opinion though.
Yeah. What an opinion, Rick Curti. I'll tell you, for a guy with Mr. Opinion,
I like it.
Analyze Candy Ebling's thoughts here. Sorry, Greg, but she really she struck you up with some pretty valid points here. So, all right, we're going to.
I don't know.
Huh? What's that?
I know if you were the general manager of a baseball team and they said, look, I got 2 prospects for you. One guy strikes out 10 batters a game, but he walks 6. The other guy only strikes out 4, but only walks 2 a game. Which pitch are you taking? They're going to take the guy who doesn't walk somebody.
I don't know. I'm big on the strikeouts, but it just depends on the pitcher too.
Hey, Greg Maddox had a pretty good career without striking out 10, 12, 15 guys a game.
Candy's trying to do, Craig, okay?
I know. I'm just firing back. I like it.
All he's trying to do is the object of the game is put bat on ball, but a lot of the reality is lots of guys don't put bat on ball, and in 5,714 times they didn't put bat on ball and they were out. Okay, so I know where you're coming from. I get it. Everybody loves a strikeout. I get that, but Candy, you know what? Rick, what are your thoughts about what she said?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put him on my list either. So, I mean, but the only reason I left him off my list is because it was only 4. If it was 6, he'd be on my list.
Right.
And I think that's the amazing part about Nolan Ryan. He pitched 27 years. He was like in the mid-40s, still throwing 100 miles an hour. He wasn't like Frank Tanana, whose arm was so dead. You know, I mean, he was the dominant pitcher from his early days to his later days. That's what makes him remarkable. But, I mean, I could have put him on my list. I feel good about these 4. And it's amazing he never won a Cy Young. Just like Greg Maddox never pitched a no-hitter or ever threw a perfect game, which is mind-boggling to me with the control that he had. You think he threw at least a couple of them. So it's a tough list, you know, and you're going to have different variances. Probably the only one I disagree with Mariano Rivera. I'm not going to put a reliever on there. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Wow. You know, that's just my opinion. I'm going to put starter. So, but I can see where Eric was going with that because he was, you know, probably the greatest closer of all time.
All right, so I'm going to ask every one of you, okay, when you look at the strikeout, what board game do you think it resembles the most, okay, for the strikeout? I'm going to make you guys think a little bit. I got another few more minutes left in the show here. Rick, board game compared to a strikeout, which one in your mind would you compare it to?
It's probably, I would compare it to like a home run when someone hits a home run.
No, I'm talking about a regular board game that you would play.
Not like a regular
board game. Give us an example, Scott, of what you're thinking.
No. I want to see how many people played board games here.
I haven't played. I mean, I guess Monopoly. It's the only one I've got.
All right, we'll say Monopoly's your guess. What about you, Greg?
I have played many a board game. I don't correlate any of them with strikeouts. I'll go with Scrabble. So I can spell strike in Scrabble.
And what about you, Candy?
How about sorry?
Okay. So Rick has Monopoly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's a reason why I'm doing this exercise. Greg has Scrabble, right? And Candy has sorry. Okay. You know what? I figure the equivalent to strikeout is called chess. Okay. That's how I look at it. The whole idea is you want to outthink the hitter and just blow it by him any way that you can and outthink him. And you have the catcher right there. If I can put it in the right spot, I'm ahead of this guy and he's done.
So my question is to you guys. We talked about the era, and obviously most of us put people on there that have longevity. So my question to you is, of the pitchers that are pitching now, which ones would you put on? And you can just say one, but like there's the Clayton Kershaw, who's got 25 complete games. So he's getting, and he has 27% of the people that he faces strike out. Or do we put like a Zach Greinke or Chris Sale? Like, who would you put on this list? And do you think anybody will come close if you're going to compare to the people that you did put on your list? How long do these pitchers have to pitch to get onto your list?
Those are great questions. All right, since we're on this subject here, I think it's certainly worth addressing. I really do, since we didn't factor them in. But you know what? That's one of those type of things where you actually go ahead and get people to think. So, yeah. All right, go ahead.
Modern era pitchers who jump out at me. One is Kershaw. The other one's Max Scherzer.
Okay, so Greg,
you're 3 Cy Youngs, I believe.
So Greg, you say Clayton and Max, right?
Yeah.
What about you, Rick?
Same thing. Scherzer, Kershaw, they're going to the Hall of Fame. Those are the ones that I could see 20 years from now, if they had a list, I could see Kershaw and Max Scherzer on there.
What about you, Candy?
Kershaw, I think, Scherzer, but I would also give honorable mention to maybe Justin Verlander.
Oh, okay. So you get 3. Okay.
Well,
I like it.
I mean, Josh Hader is just. I mean, I would say Josh Hader, but because he's very dominant, but he is very 1 inning or 2 innings specific.
Right. Okay. All right. So, all right. I see where you're coming from. I'll give you my 2. Okay, Candy, you're good. You slipped the third one in beautifully. So, But that was smart. I'll tell you, she's a dynamo for this business. We'll make sure that she's definitely going to be starring in a lot more shows than this. She just got herself a permanent spot on the air.
I have my Wisconsin show. That's good enough for me.
It just
All right, well,
happens to be a Milwaukee
I'll give you
girl.
mine too. Mine too is definitely Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. And of course, we know Clayton Kershaw is inevitable. But if I'm forced to choose two, Justin Verlander has the no hitters, and Max Scherzer, well, Stan Huff knows them all too well because that was a little trivia question that a lot of us will realize that he was the first pitcher, Greg, that you're going to find out that actually managed Max Scherzer. But yeah, how do you argue against Clayton Kershaw? But if I'm going to go with two, I'm going to go Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer for sure. So. And again, I realize anybody could have made a case for Pedro Martinez, but no, I wasn't going to put him anywhere near it because there are too many other choices. If you're talking anything above 10 or 15, and that's another story. I mean, and then again, you can break down pitchers in terms of what they did in their postseason. And then you wonder why Curt Schilling's not in the Hall of Fame because of his big mouth, not because of what he did on the field. But that's for another animal. So, meanwhile, great show, great opinions, lots of names. Really appreciated the contribution from all of you, plus Eric Katz as well. So, with that said, okay, Rick, Curti, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
You can find me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. You can go on there and sign a petition to bring Major League Baseball to Charlotte. I'm also on there on Facebook at Charlotte MLB. I'm also on there, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on LinkedIn under Rick Curti. I'm on Instagram on Charlotte Bats and Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball. And if you have any comments or questions, my email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
And I should also point out Rick does a fantastic job, not only appearing on all the different shows we have on the network, but more importantly, his contribution on social media is priceless. We can't thank you enough for everything you do to promote what we do with our written content. We need the written content as well as the broadcast, and we appreciate you promoting it as much as you can. All right, Greg Fuchs, the author of all of our good content, fire away.
Yeah, you can find all my articles, including the two I did on Mount Rushmore, on SouthFloridaTribune.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter at GFuchs, at Gregory Fuchs.
All right, Candy Ebling.
So I'm going to say, please subscribe to South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed, there's going to be a little button on the lower right corner of the screen, and click it, subscribe, watch. If you enjoyed this video, there's many more up there. Please do so. But you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Back up to you, Scott.
All right, Candy. Well done. Okay. Well, at least there's two things I don't have to mention. Sure, I told you to subscribe, but at any rate, you're looking at the ticker. It's in front of you. If you're not, listen to Candy Ebling, myself. Yeah, feel free to subscribe to South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Find this show here on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, Twitter at Tribune South, and you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Candy, am I forgetting anything, or did I pretty much say it? The fact that Candy Ebling does an awesome job as putting the website together. She's the mastermind behind putting the content up, and she does not only a great job with the content, but the broadcast as well. So what do we got, Candy? We got the audio, we got the visual, what you mentioned, the Twitter.
Website, that's good. We appreciate any comments, or any ideas. Keep them coming so we can do more shows like this. Give us an idea. We'll talk to Greg, have him write up the story, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and I should point out Greg does a good job on the Fire Up Florida series as well. So keep up the good work. Everybody on our network does a great job contributing in their own way. So I don't want to single out anybody right now. Obviously, I don't mind pointing out the individuals on this broadcast, but everybody deserves their kudos because I'm not a one-man act. I'll never pretend to be. You have to have a good supporting cast and team, and I'm very proud to be surrounded by exactly that. So meanwhile,
kudos to Scott for organizing all of this and putting it all together.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Well,
great moderator.
Well, thank you. Well, again, I'm always good with my supporting cast, not tooting our horn, but you know what? We do work very hard to put it all together. So meanwhile, on behalf of Rick Curti, Greg Fuchs, Candy Ebling, my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Manmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Until the next time. Good night, everybody. God bless. Please be safe. Until the next time. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.